"They will be here directly," she said, and taking a seat at one end of the rock, invited me to sit down on the other edge. The afterglow was beginning to fade in the sky, and a single star twinkled faintly through the rosy haze. A long wavering triangle of waterfowl drifted southward over our heads, and from the swamps around plover were calling. "They are very beautiful, these moors," she said quietly. "Beautiful, but cruel to strangers," I answered. "Beautiful and cruel," she repeated dreamily. "Beautiful and cruel." "Like a woman," I said stupidly. "Oh!" she cried, with a little catch in her breath, and looked at me. Her dark eyes met mine, and I thought she seemed angry or frightened. "Like a woman," she repeated under her breath. "How cruel to say so." Then, after a pause, as though speaking aloud to herself, "How cruel for him to say that." I don't know what sort of apology I offered for my inane though harmless speech, but I know that she seemed so troubled about it that I began to think I had said something very dreadful without knowing it, and remembered with horror the pitfalls and snares which the French language sets for foreigners. While I was trying to imagine what I might have said, a sound of voices came across the moor, and the girl rose to her feet. "No," she said, with a trace of a smile on her pale face, "I will not accept your apologies, monsieur, but I must prove you wrong, and that shall be my revenge. Look, here come Hastur and Raoul." Two men loomed up in the twilight. One had a sack across his shoulders, and the other carried a hoop before him, as a waiter carries a tray. The hoop was fastened with straps to his shoulders, and around the edge of the circlet sat three hooded falcons, fitted with tinkling bells. The girl stepped up to the falconer, and with a quick turn of her wrist transferred her falcon to the hoop, where it quickly sidled off and nestled among its mates, who shook their hooded heads and ruffled their feathers till the belled jesses tinkled again. The other man stepped forward, and bowing respectfully, took up the hare and dropped it into the game sack. "These are my piqueurs," said the girl, turning to me with a gentle dignity. "Raoul is a good falconier, and I shall some day make him grand veneur. Hastur is incomparable." The two silent men saluted me respectfully. "Did I not tell you, monsieur, that I should prove you wrong?" she continued. "This, then, is my revenge, that you do me the courtesy of accepting food and shelter at my own house." Before I could answer, she spoke to the falconers, who started instantly across the heath, and with a gracious gesture to me she followed. I don't know whether I made her understand how profoundly grateful I felt, but she seemed pleased to listen as we walked over the dewy heather. "Are you not very tired?" she asked. I had clean forgotten my fatigue in her presence, and I told her so. "Don't you think your gallantry is a little old-fashioned?" she said, and when I looked confused and humbled, she added quietly, "Oh, I like it. I like everything old-fashioned, and it is delightful to hear you say such pretty things." The moorland around us was very still now under its ghostly sheet of mist. The plovers had ceased their calling. The crickets and all the little creatures of the fields were silent as we passed, yet it seemed to me as if I could hear them beginning again far behind us. Well in advance the two tall falconers strode across the heather, and the faint jingling of the hawks' bells came to our ears in distant murmuring chimes. Suddenly a splendid hound dashed out of the mist in front, followed by another and another, until half a dozen or more were bounding and leaping around the girl beside me. She caressed and quieted them with her gloved hand, speaking to them in quaint terms which I remembered to have seen in old French manuscripts. Then the falcons on the circlet borne by the falconer ahead began to beat their wings and scream, and from somewhere out of sight the notes of a hunting horn floated across the moor. The hounds sprang away before us and vanished in the twilight. The falcons flapped and squealed upon their perch, and the girl, taking up the song of the horn, began to hum. Clear and mellow her voice sounded in the night air. Chasseur, chasseur, chassez encore. Quittez Rosette et Jonathan. Ton, 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 ton. Ou pour abattre dès l'aurore. Que les amours soient de plein temps. Ton, 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 ton. As I listened to her lovely voice, a grey mass which rapidly grew more distinct loomed up in front, and the horn rang out joyously through the tumult of the hounds and falcons. A torch glimmered at a gate. A light streamed through an opening door, and we stepped upon a wooden bridge which trembled under our feet and rose creaking and straining behind us as we passed over the moat and into a small stone court, walled on every side. From an open doorway a man came, and, bending in salutation, presented a cup to the girl beside me. She took the cup and touched it with her lips, then lowering it, turned to me and said in a low voice, "I bid you welcome." At that moment one of the falconers came with another cup, but before handing it to me, presented it to the girl, who tasted it. The falconer made a gesture to receive it, but she hesitated a moment, and then, stepping forward, offered me the cup with her own hands. I felt this to be an act of extraordinary graciousness, but hardly knew what was expected of me, and did not raise it to my lips at once. The girl flushed crimson. I saw that I must act quickly. "Mademoiselle," I faltered, "a stranger whom you have saved from dangers he may never realize empties this cup to the gentlest and loveliest hostess of France." "In his name," she murmured, crossing herself as I drained the cup. Then, stepping into the doorway, she turned to me with a pretty gesture, and taking my hand in hers, led me into the house, saying again and again, "You are very welcome. Indeed, you are welcome to the Château d'Ys." Part 2. I awoke next morning with the music of the horn in my ears, and leaping out of the ancient bed, went to a curtained window where the sunlight filtered through little deep-set panes. The horn ceased as I looked into the court below. A man who might have been brother to the two falconers of the night before stood in the midst of a pack of hounds. A curved horn was strapped over his back, and in his hand he held a long-lashed whip. The dogs whined and yelped, dancing around him in anticipation. There was the stamp of horses, too, in the walled yard. "Mount!" cried a voice in Breton, and with a clatter of hoofs the two falconers with falcons upon their wrists rode into the courtyard among the hounds. Then I heard another voice which sent the blood throbbing through my heart. "Piriou Louis, hunt the hounds well and spare neither spur nor whip. Thou, Raoul, and thou, Gaston, see that the épervier does not prove himself niais, and if it be best in your judgment, faites courtoisie à l'oiseau. Jardinier an oiseau, like the muet there on Hastur's wrist, is not difficult, but thou, Raoul, mayst not find it so simple to govern that hagard. Twice last week he foamed au vif, and lost the beccade, although he is used to the leurre. The bird acts like a stupid branchier. Paître un hagard n'est pas si facile." Was I dreaming? The old language of falconry, which I had read in yellow manuscripts, the old forgotten French of the Middle Ages, was sounding in my ears, while the hounds bayed and the hawks' bells tinkled accompaniment to the stamping horses. She spoke again in the sweet, forgotten language. "If you would rather attach the longe and leave the hagard au bloc, Raoul, I shall say nothing, for it were a pity to spoil so fair a day's sport with an ill-trained sort. Laissez-moi abaisser. It is possibly the best way. Ça lui donnera des ailes. I was perhaps hasty with the bird. It takes time to pass à la filière, and the exercise is d'escape." Then the falconer, Raoul, bowed